Beware of the empath with no friends, not because they are lost, but because they have found something. When you see them standing alone at the edge of the crowd, you assume they are afraid. You think they cannot connect. You believe they lack the social skills to navigate the world of relationships. You are mistaken. Carl Jung understood that the most dangerous transformations happen in silence. The empath who walks away from everyone is not retreating from life. They are advancing towards something the collective cannot see. They are not avoiding connection. They are refusing contamination. And that refusal makes them a threat to every system that relies on their compliance. In this video, we explore why the friendless empath is not the loneliest soul in the room, but the one who has stopped lying to themselves about what friendship has become. The disappearance was never sudden, it was inevitable. Most people believe that empaths isolate because they have been hurt. This is partially true, but it misses the deeper mechanism. The empath loner did not leave because of one betrayal or one disappointing friendship. They left because they finally recognized the pattern beneath all their relationships. Jung described the human psyche as a meaning-making apparatus. We are constantly searching for patterns to make sense of our experience. For years, the empath participated in relationships while ignoring the data their unconscious was collecting. Every interaction was being recorded, every exchange was being measured, and slowly, undeniably, a pattern emerged. The pattern was this: every friendship required them to become smaller. Science tells us that the nervous system learns through repetition. When an empath enters a social situation, their autonomic nervous system begins scanning for danger. But the danger is not always obvious. It does not come dressed as hostility. It comes dressed as expectation. The empath learns that to be accepted, they must dim their perception. They must pretend not to notice what they notice. They must act as though the lies people tell are truth. In every group, there is an invisible agreement about what can be said and what must remain unsaid. The empath sees this immediately. They see the friend who claims to be happy in their marriage, while their body language screams despair. They see the colleague who projects confidence while drowning in insecurity. They see the family member who demands respect while offering none. The empath's original instinct is to speak this truth, but they learn very quickly that truth is the most unwelcome guest at the table of social bonding. Jung spoke of collective consciousness, the shared assumptions and beliefs that hold groups together. To belong to the collective, you must agree to its delusions. You must participate in the shared denial. The empath tried. For years, they bit their tongue. They nodded along. They laughed at jokes that were not funny. They validated feelings they knew were based on distortions. But there is a psychic cost to this performance. Every time you suppress your authentic perception, you create a split in your consciousness. Jung called this fragmentation. Part of you knows the truth. Part of you is pretending the truth does not exist. These two parts cannot coexist peacefully. Eventually, the tension becomes unbearable. The empath reaches a breaking point where the cost of belonging exceeds the benefit. They realize that they have been trading their sanity for social acceptance, and the exchange rate was never fair. This is when the withdrawal begins. It is not dramatic. They do not announce their departure. They simply stop showing up. They stop answering the phone. They stop making plans. And when people ask what happened, the empath has no simple explanation because the truth is too complex for a casual conversation. The truth is that they have been slowly suffocating in a world that calls suffocation friendship. People assume the empath is depressed. They assume the empath needs help. But what they fail to see is that the empath is helping themselves by removing themselves from the help. The isolation is not the problem. The isolation is the solution to a problem no one else can acknowledge. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, comment the word awake below. That recognition is not the beginning of loneliness. It is the beginning of clarity. The empath loner carries a secret that most people spend their lives avoiding. They have discovered that friendship, as it is commonly practiced, is not a relationship between two authentic selves. It is a transaction between two performances. Jung argued that we all wear masks. He called this mask the persona, the version of ourselves we present to the world to gain acceptance. The persona is not necessarily false, but it is incomplete. It shows only what is socially acceptable and hides what is not. For most people, friendship is an agreement between two personas. You show me your acceptable face, and I will show you mine. We will both pretend that this is intimacy. We will both pretend that this is connection. The empath tried to play this game, but their wiring made it impossible. Neuroscience shows us that empaths have heightened activity in the mirror neuron system. These are the neural circuits that allow us to feel what others are feeling. When you speak, the empath does not just hear your words. They feel the emotion beneath the words. They sense the incongruence between what you say and what you mean. This makes them walking lie detectors. In every friendship, they could feel the places where the other person was performing. They could sense when someone was agreeing with them just to avoid conflict. They could detect when praise was offered not from genuine admiration, but from obligation. They could feel when someone was using the friendship as a mirror to validate their own ego rather than as a space to know another person. At first, the empath made excuses for this. They told themselves that everyone has insecurities. They told themselves that people are doing their best. They tried to be patient and understanding, but patience has limits. Jung taught that the unconscious keeps perfect records. Even when we consciously choose to overlook something, the unconscious notes it. The empath's unconscious was building a case, and eventually, the verdict became undeniable. The verdict was this: most people do not want to be known. They want to be confirmed. There is a profound difference between these two desires. To be known is to be seen in your totality, including your contradictions, your flaws, your fears, and your shadow. To be confirmed is to have someone agree with your self-image, to reinforce the story you tell yourself about who you are. The empath wanted to know people. They wanted depth. They wanted the conversation beneath the conversation. They wanted to sit in the uncomfortable spaces where real transformation happens. But what they found was that most people wanted to stay on the surface. They wanted to talk about safe topics. They wanted to vent without being challenged. They wanted support without accountability. This is what Jung meant when he said that the collective resists consciousness. Becoming conscious is painful. It requires you to face the parts of yourself you have been avoiding. Most people would rather stay asleep and surround themselves with others who will help them maintain the sleep. The empath tried to wake people up gently. They would ask questions that pointed toward deeper truths. They would offer observations that invited self-reflection. But these attempts were almost always met with resistance or hostility. People do not want mirrors. They want cheerleaders. The empath realized that in most friendships, they were being used as an emotional service provider. People came to them when they needed to be heard, validated, or soothed. But when the empath needed the same in return, those people were suddenly unavailable. The reciprocity was asymmetrical. The empath was giving gallons and receiving drops. Jung described this as psychic vampirism, though he used different language. He understood that some relationships are extractive by design. One person feeds off the energy of the other without offering equal nourishment in return. The empath loner has stopped feeding the vampires. This decision often confuses people. They say, but that is what friends are for, to support each other. And the empath agrees. But they have learned to distinguish between support and exploitation. Support is bidirectional. Exploitation is unidirectional. They have also learned something even more radical. They have learned that their need for friendship was often based on conditioning, not genuine desire. Society teaches us from childhood that having many friends is a sign of health and success. Being alone is pathologized. We are taught to fear solitude. But the empath discovered that this fear was implanted. It was not organic. When they actually sat with their solitude, they did not find the darkness they were warned about. They found peace. They found space. They found themselves. The friendships they walked away from were not serving their soul. They were serving their conditioning. They were maintaining an image. They were fulfilling an expectation. But they were not nourishing the core of who the empath truly is. Jung's process of individuation requires you to separate from collective expectations. You must risk the disapproval of the group to become an individual. The empath has taken this risk. They have chosen authenticity over approval, and that choice has left them standing alone. When the empath withdraws from the social world, something unexpected happens. The energy that was once scattered across dozens of shallow relationships begins to consolidate. It pools inward, and in that pooling, a new structure forms. Jung called this process the consolidation of the self. The self, in Jungian psychology, is the central organizing principle of the psyche. It is the core of who you are beneath all the roles you play. For most of their life, the empath's sense of self was fragmented. They were a different version of themselves with every person they knew. With their family, they were the peacemaker. With their friends, they were the therapist. With their partner, they were the emotional regulator. They shape-shifted constantly to meet the needs of their environment. But in doing so, they lost contact with their own center. Neuroscience confirms what Jung intuited. The brain requires periods of non-stimulation to integrate experience. When you are constantly responding to external demands, the brain never has the space to process and consolidate. You live in a state of reactive fragmentation. The empath's withdrawal creates that space. For the first time, they are not answering to anyone. They are not managing anyone's emotions. They are not performing for anyone's approval. And in that absence of external demand, the scattered pieces of the self begin to come home. This is not a comfortable process. At first, the silence feels threatening. The empath is so accustomed to the noise of other people's needs that the quiet feels like emptiness. They panic. They wonder if they have made a mistake. They reach for their phone, tempted to reconnect with old friends just to fill the void. But if they resist that temptation, something remarkable happens. The void begins to speak. Jung understood that the unconscious communicates through symbols, dreams, and sudden insights. When the conscious mind is not cluttered with external chatter, the unconscious finally has room to deliver its messages. The empath begins to hear their own inner voice with clarity for the first time. They begin to remember desires they suppressed. They begin to feel anger they were taught to hide. They begin to recognize needs they were trained to ignore. This is the return of the shadow. Most people fear the shadow. They believe it contains only destructive impulses. But Jung knew that the shadow also contains gold. It contains the vitality, the creativity, the power, and the authenticity that were rejected in order to fit in. The empath loner is integrating their shadow. They are reclaiming the parts of themselves that were exiled. The coldness people now perceive in them is not cruelty. It is the return of their discernment. The distance people now feel from them is not rejection. It is the presence of their boundaries. For years, the empath's boundaries were porous. Anyone could walk into their psychic space and leave their emotional baggage there. The empath felt obligated to carry it. Now the boundaries have solidified. The empath has learned to say no without guilt. They have learned to let people experience the consequences of their own choices. They have learned that allowing someone to struggle is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. This shift creates a new kind of presence. When someone is no longer desperate for your approval, they emanate a different frequency. They are no longer asking for permission to exist. They are no longer apologizing for taking up space. They are simply there, solid and unshakable. Jung described this quality as psychological mass. It is the weight of a person who is fully inhabiting themselves. You can feel it when you stand next to them. They do not scatter their attention. They do not leak their energy. They are gathered. This gathering of the self changes how the empath moves through the world. They are no longer reading every room trying to figure out how to fit in. They are no longer scanning every face for signs of approval or disapproval. Their attention has turned inward. They are listening to their own rhythm. This inward focus is often mistaken for selfishness. People say, "You have changed. You only think about yourself now." And the empath does not argue, because it is true. They are thinking about themselves now. For the first time in their life, they are prioritizing their own needs, and they refuse to apologize for it. Jung taught that selfishness and self-care are not the same thing. Selfishness is taking at the expense of others. Self-care is honoring your own needs so that you do not collapse. The empath is engaged in radical self-care. They are finally treating themselves with the same compassion they have always given to others. This internal reorganization also changes their relationship with time. When you are constantly responding to other people's urgency, you live in borrowed time. Your schedule is not yours. Your energy is not yours. Your attention is not yours. The empath has reclaimed their time. They move at their own pace. They rest when they need to rest. They engage when they choose to engage. This reclamation of time is an act of rebellion in a culture that demands constant availability. The empath is no longer on call. Their presence is no longer a given. It is a choice, and that choice is rarely made. What people fail to understand about the empath loner is that their solitude is not passive. It is an active state of protection and cultivation. They are not simply avoiding people. They are practicing something far more sophisticated, energetic sovereignty. Jung recognized that psychological energy operates according to specific laws, much like physical energy. It can be transferred, depleted, conserved, or accumulated. The empath spent decades operating as an open circuit, constantly receiving and transmitting emotional energy from everyone around them. This openness was their gift, but it was also their vulnerability. In their years of people-pleasing and caretaking, the empath functioned like an ungrounded electrical system. Every emotion in their vicinity would flow through them, often without discrimination. They absorbed the anxiety of strangers in the grocery store. They took on the depression of colleagues at work. They carried the unresolved trauma of family members they had not seen in years. This constant influx created what Jung might have called psychic inflation, a state where the boundaries between self and other become so blurred that you no longer know which feelings belong to you and which ones you have absorbed from the environment. The withdrawal into solitude allows the empath to finally ground their system. They learn to close the circuit when necessary. They learn to differentiate between their own emotional content and the emotional content of others. This is not the same as becoming cold or unfeeling. It is the development of energetic discernment. Think of it this way. Before, the empath was like a house with no doors. Anyone could walk in at any time and rearrange the furniture. Now they have installed doors, locks, and a security system. The house is still the same house. The warmth inside is still real, but now access is controlled. This control manifests in subtle but powerful ways. The empath loner has developed what can only be described as a psychic immune system. Just as your physical immune system recognizes and neutralizes pathogens, their psychic immune system now recognizes and neutralizes emotional manipulation, boundary violations, and energy drains. When someone approaches them with a hidden agenda, the empath's system registers it immediately. They feel a subtle contraction in their solar plexus. A quiet alarm sounds in their awareness. In the past, they would override this signal. They would tell themselves they were being paranoid or judgmental. They would open the door anyway. Now they trust the signal. They honor the contraction. They keep the door closed. Jung spoke of the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold two opposing forces in tension until a third, higher perspective emerges. The empath loner has developed this function with regards to connection and protection. They no longer see these as mutually exclusive. They understand that true connection can only happen between two sovereign beings, and sovereignty requires protection. This realization changes everything about how they relate to the concept of friendship. They understand now that the old model, where you prove your love by having no boundaries, was a recipe for codependency, not connection. They understand that enmeshment is not intimacy. They understand that being able to say no is what makes saying yes meaningful. The empath has also discovered something profound about the nature of their own energy. In solitude, without the constant drain of managing other people's emotions, they have access to reservoirs of creativity, clarity, and vitality they forgot they possessed. They realized they were not actually low energy by nature. They were simply depleted by an unsustainable lifestyle. This discovery is revolutionary. It means that their previous exhaustion was not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It was a logical consequence of operating beyond their energetic budget for years or even decades. The fatigue they felt was their psyche's way of trying to force a course correction. Now that they are living within their means energetically, they experience something they had almost given up on: aliveness. Not the frantic, anxious aliveness of constantly responding to crises, but a deep, grounded aliveness that comes from being in alignment with their own nature. They wake up in the morning without immediately checking their phone to see who needs them. They spend hours in creative pursuits without feeling guilty for not being available. They take long walks without telling anyone where they are going. They sit in coffee shops and observe humanity without feeling obligated to engage with it. This is not misanthropy. This is conservation. They are conserving their energy for what truly matters to them. And increasingly, they are discovering that what truly matters has very little to do with the social circus they left behind. Jung taught that individuation requires you to become conscious of your own unconscious patterns. The empath loner has become conscious of their pattern of self-abandonment in the name of helping others. They have seen how this pattern was established in childhood, reinforced in adolescence, and perfected in adulthood, and they have made the radical decision to break it. Breaking this pattern means disappointing people. It means being misunderstood. It means being labeled as cold, selfish, or changed. The empath has accepted these labels as the price of their freedom. They would rather be misunderstood and whole than understood and fragmented. This acceptance marks the final stage of their transformation. They are no longer trying to control how others perceive them. They are no longer managing their image. They have released the exhausting project of making everyone understand their choices. They simply live them. And in that living, they discover that sovereignty is not something you achieve once and then maintain effortlessly. It is something you practice daily. Every time they feel the old impulse to overgive, they pause. Every time they feel the old guilt for prioritizing themselves, they breathe through it. Every time they feel the old fear of being alone, they remind themselves of what they found in solitude: themselves. This is the mechanics of energetic sovereignty. It is not a theory. It is a practice. It is not a destination. It is a way of being. And for the empath loner, it has become the only way of being that does not require them to betray themselves. There is a particular form of power that belongs exclusively to those who have nothing to lose. The empath loner has entered this category. They have already lost what most people fear losing: social approval, belonging, and connection. And in that loss, they have gained something far more valuable: impermeability. To be impermeable is to be unaffected by the opinions and judgments of others. It does not mean you do not hear them. It means they do not penetrate. They do not change the structure of your self-perception. Jung observed that most people are psychologically possessed by the opinions of others. They see themselves through the eyes of the collective. If the collective approves, they feel good. If the collective disapproves, they feel bad. This makes them easy to control. You simply threaten to withdraw approval, and they will contort themselves to regain it. The empath loner is no longer in this prison. They have stopped outsourcing their self-worth. They know who they are, and that knowledge does not depend on external validation. This makes them ungovernable. Consider how most relationships function. They operate on a system of unspoken leverage. I give you validation, and in return, you give me compliance. I give you belonging, and in return, you suppress your inconvenient truths. This system depends on both parties needing something from each other. The empath no longer needs what you are offering. They do not need your validation because they have validated themselves. They do not need your belonging because they belong to themselves. This removes all the leverage you might have once had over them. People find this deeply unsettling. When you cannot move someone with guilt, praise, anger, or silence, you feel powerless. And that powerlessness often turns into aggression. People will accuse the empath of being cold, selfish, or emotionally unavailable. These accusations are attempts to provoke a reaction, to pull the empath back into the game. But the empath does not take the bait. They see the accusation for what it is, a manipulation tactic designed to reinstate the old dynamic. They respond not with defense, but with observation. They might say, "I understand that my boundaries are uncomfortable for you." And then they hold the boundary. This is the essence of their new power. It is not the power to dominate. It is the power to remain unmoved. Jung called this the standpoint of the self, a position of psychological stability that does not fluctuate with external circumstances. From this standpoint, the empath can see manipulation attempts with perfect clarity. They can see when someone is using emotional intensity to create urgency. They can see when someone is weaponizing their own victimhood to extract caretaking. They can see when someone is offering affection as a form of debt that will later be called in. And because they can see these mechanisms, they are no longer vulnerable to them. This clarity extends to their communication. The empath loner speaks differently now. They do not over-explain. They do not justify their decisions. They state their truth once and allow others to react however they need to react. If someone misunderstands them, the empath does not chase them down to correct the misunderstanding. They trust that those who are meant to understand will understand. Those who are not meant to understand will not, and that is acceptable. This economy of speech is a form of power. In a world where people use words to manipulate, convince, and perform, the person who speaks only truth and only when necessary stands out. Their words are not diluted by anxiety or the need to please. Their words land with weight. Jung taught that true power emerges when you integrate the opposites within yourself. The empath has integrated their light and their darkness. They know they are capable of great compassion, and they know they are capable of great coldness. They do not deny either capacity. This integration makes them whole, and wholeness is magnetic in a world full of fragmented people. The empath is no longer trying to be good. They are trying to be real. And reality has a gravity that performance lacks. People often ask, "Do you ever get lonely?" The empath loner understands that loneliness and aloneness are not the same experience. Loneliness is the feeling of being disconnected from yourself. Aloneness is the state of being with yourself. The empath is not lonely. They are alone. And they have discovered that their own company is richer than the company of those who do not see them. When you encounter an empath who keeps no friends, you are standing before a mirror you did not ask for. Their solitude is not a statement about them. It is a statement about the world they left behind. And if you are honest, it is a statement about you. Jung believed that every person we meet is a projection screen for our unconscious material. When you feel disturbed by the empath's isolation, you are not reacting to their isolation. You are reacting to what their isolation reveals about your own life. If you feel pity when you see them alone, ask yourself why. Is it because you genuinely believe they are suffering? Or is it because you cannot imagine being content without constant social contact? Your pity may be a projection of your own fear of solitude. You are seeing your own terror reflected in their stillness. If you feel anger or judgment toward them, ask yourself what that anger is protecting. Are you angry because they have rejected something you still cling to? Are you angry because they have done what you are too afraid to do? Walk away from relationships that do not serve them? Your anger may be a defense against your own discomfort with your compromises. If you feel drawn to them, curious about their inner world, ask yourself what you are seeking. Are you drawn to their peace? Are you drawn to their freedom? Your curiosity may be a recognition of something you have lost or never had, the courage to be alone with yourself. The empath loner is a living question mark in the social landscape. Their existence asks, is it possible to be whole without being part of a tribe? Is it possible to be connected to yourself even when disconnected from everyone else? Is it possible that solitude is not a failure but a choice? These are uncomfortable questions because they challenge the foundation of how most people construct their identity. We are taught that our value comes from our relationships. We are taught that isolation is pathological. We are taught that the goal of life is to accumulate connections. The empath has rejected this teaching, not because they believe it is wrong for everyone, but because they have discovered it is wrong for them. They have found that their soul does not thrive in the noise, it thrives in the silence. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The empath loner has claimed that privilege. They have stopped being who they were expected to be. They have stopped performing the role that was assigned to them. They have stepped out of the collective dream and into their own reality. This is why they are dangerous. Not because they will harm you, but because they might inspire you. They might make you question your own relationships. They might make you wonder if you too are performing rather than living. They might make you ask yourself the most terrifying question of all. If I stopped being who everyone needs me to be, who would I actually be? The empath loner has answered that question for themselves, and the answer required them to walk away from everything they once knew. It required them to sit in the discomfort of not belonging. It required them to face the judgment of those who believe that solitude is synonymous with failure. But on the other side of that judgment, they found something no one can take from them. They found themselves. Not the fragmented, people-pleasing, shape-shifting version, but the solid, integrated, whole version. The version that does not need permission to exist. The version that does not apologize for taking up space. The version that can look in the mirror and see someone they actually recognize. So beware of the empath with no friends. Not because they are broken, but because they are whole. Not because they are weak, but because they have become strong in a way that requires nothing from you. Not because they are lost, but because they have found the one place most people spend their entire lives avoiding: themselves. If you meet such a person, do not try to save them. They do not need saving. Do not try to fix them. They are not broken. Do not try to include them. They have chosen exclusion as an act of self-preservation. But if you recognize yourself in these words, if you feel the pull toward your own solitude, if you sense that the friendships in your life are costing you more than they are giving, then perhaps you are beginning your own journey. Perhaps you are beginning to hear the call of your own soul, asking you to come home. Jung taught that the journey inward is the only journey that matters. The empath loner has taken that journey. They have traveled to the center of themselves and found that it was enough, more than enough. And if that journey calls to you, know that the path is not easy. It is not comfortable. It requires you to face your conditioning, your fears, and your loneliness. But on the other side of that facing, there is a life that is truly yours, a life that is not borrowed from the expectations of others, a life that is real. The empath with no friends is not the warning. They are the invitation. An invitation to stop abandoning yourself in the name of connection. An invitation to stop fragmenting yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. An invitation to come home to the only relationship that will never betray you, the relationship with yourself. That is the beware, not a threat, but a threshold. And beyond that threshold, a truth you have always known but were too afraid to live. You are enough, even alone. especially alone. If this resonates with the journey you are on or the person you are becoming, click the next video. There is more to uncover about the path of those who choose themselves over the comfort of the crowd.